Hello, E-Man here with you again to talk with you a little bit more about the BB machine gun. I'd like to start off just by saying that this machine gun is not a toy by any stretch of the imagination. It will shoot through 2 layers of standard corrugated cardboard and just about shoot through a 3rd layer, which tells me that it could do some serious injury to people. So use your head. Whatever you do, be safe. All the safety rules apply. Yes, try this at home. Please be careful. So that's the whole idea behind this. So there might be some questions that you're thinking. Can this BB machine gun design be adapted to shoot the 6mm airsoft BBs? And my answer to that is, I believe so. If you can find a barrel tube that the BB fits in well enough, it doesn't have to be snug, but you don't want a lot of blow by, because remember, you need the back pressure for the second half of the operating cycle of the diaphragm. So as long as you can achieve that, I'm pretty confident that you'll do just fine. Another question is, E-Man, you ever think about building a submachine gun version of the BBV? And the answer to that is absolutely. Cute little bugger, isn't it? I have. This has been my test bed for a long time. I've had tons and tons of fun working with this thing. I did all my learning on this one. Unfortunately, after many rounds of modding and testing, I've lost my tolerances and probably a few poor material choices. And I've sucked all the life out of this one. So I'd love to demonstrate it for you, but unfortunately, this one, which is my first design, the BBV submachine gun, no longer functions as designed, so wham. But anyway, I will revisit this one. I've applied everything that I've learned on this one to the BBV machine gun, and I will revisit this one probably this fall when I start my next hibernation cycle. So that'll be fun. These are really, really fun. And I would actually suggest you start with this. It's actually a little bit simpler than the full-blown machine gun. And it's a lot of fun to shoot. It's shorter barrel, it's got a faster rate of fire. This one is probably 400 to 500 BBs per minute. This one is more like 900 to 1100 BBs per minute. So it's a burp gun and tons of fun. I will show you the guts on this one too. Just because it's a little bit simpler than this one. So I'm not going to talk too much about the skin on this. I threw this together pretty fast. I just wanted to get this mechanism in something to protect it, because it is just a little bit on the delicate side. You don't want to drop it on the floor or anything like that. But it is exactly what it looks like. It's PVC pipe, 1.25 inches, 3 inch. There's some 1 inch, and that's about it. At the very end, I decided to add some sights to it, just for a little accuracy test, which it's typical BB machine gun. It's not real tight. And then at the last minute, I decided to try my hand at, if you can see this, a fiber optic sight, which worked out really well, actually. So I'm real happy with that. So now that that's out of the way, let's go ahead and take her apart here. We'll make her naked for you, so you can see what she looks like without the clothes on. And we start by backing off the set screws, because there is some tension on the set screws that's being captured by the buttstock screws. So these have to be loosened first. All the way out, flush at least on the inside, so that we can slide the guts out of her. Lefty loosey. Righty tighty, lefty loosey, right? Okay, now that we've got the pressure off, we can, you can see things are starting to get floppy already. And let's go ahead and take the buttstock screws out. There's 4 of those. Sorry, I can't do the Bionic Man thing for you here. The buttstock design, or the stock design in general, the skin for this thing is satisfied with it, but not entirely happy. Of course, there's always things you could do better in hindsight. But it works well enough, and I got it into something so I could shoot the thing. It's just, that was the main goal. Okay, so this just slides right out like so, and that's about all there is to it. This is actually a piece of vinyl door trim like you'd put around your roll-up garage door. They make the vinyl stuff now, which is pretty nice because it's weldable. And so this is welded, this is all welded together, PVC. So that's nice. There's other ways of putting it together, I'm sure. That's just the way I decided to do it. Okay, now that the buttstock is out and our set screws, let me just check them real quick here to make sure they're out enough. It looks like they are. We should be able to slide everything out, and you're already starting to see some tape. Yep, that's right. I hate to disappoint you, but there's really not much to this thing. This is basically it, the whole mechanism in a nutshell. I wanted to make something that wasn't a BB blaster. BB blaster, in my opinion, the vortex chamber and the cloud chamber are not true machine guns. They have no reciprocating action or firing cycle whatsoever. They work just like sandblasters, only instead of squirting abrasive media, blasting abrasive media, they blast BBs. So if you hear me say BB blaster, that's what I'm talking about. Not taking anything away from them. They're great fun. If you don't have any fabrication experience with anything like this, I'll even go so far as to say, build a BB blaster first. Get some experience under your belt. You'll love shooting the thing. Absolutely nothing wrong with that. It's just a nomenclature thing with me. So I think BB blaster more accurately describes what they are. This, you could call it barely a machine gun if you like. I have no problem with that. Although it does have one reciprocating assembly in it, and it does have a controlled rate of fire. So it does technically meet the definition of an actual machine gun, and that's what I was after when I designed this. Something that would be a do-it-yourself version of like a commercial, like an Umarex MP. Which I own. It's great. It's a lot of fun. But what if you wanted to build one yourself? How simple can I make it? And this is about the best I could come up with. It is, as you can see, really not much to it. It's pretty damn simple. The fabrication needs to be pretty spot on, measuring, marking dimensions and that. But other than that, the materials, everything is just all over the place, not hard to find, nothing special. No special tooling at all required for this. And you can actually have yourself a rock and roll in time, without spending too much money and having the satisfaction of knowing you built it yourself. So you can see here, this is all really just brake line, hard brake line tubing. That's all it is. There's 4 different sizes involved with this one. There's 3/16, 1/4 inch, 5/16, and a little bit of 3/8. Not too much 3/16 and 3/8. Mostly 1/4 and 5/16. The 1/4 inch is the bore and the magazine. You get a little bit better of how this is put together with the diaphragm housing. This is actually during the lockdown, I didn't get to the hardware store right away. I really wanted a compression fitting. And they do make commercial. I did end up getting a commercial 3/16 compression fitting, coupling. But before I made it to the hardware store, I rattled about in my junk, and I actually found a couple of things and just made one from scratch. It's not too hard to do. And it's just a eighth inch close nipple. I flared a piece of 1/4 inch tubing, or yeah, 1/4 inch tubing, and super glued that in there. There's a lot of super glue on this. And then there's just a rubber O-ring, and then the compression sleeve, another piece of 1/4 inch, and an 1/8 inch pipe cap. So that's how I overcame that little obstacle. Let me make sure I don't lose my pots. Okay, I'm just going to put that on loose and get it out of the way here. So these particular blow-off guns are really nice. I like these because they actually look like a pistol grip. And I don't know if they still sell these at Harbor Freight or not. I was getting them there. Every time I went, I'd grab one because I knew I would be building more than one BB machine gun. And so I've got a small stockpile of these. And they're not too expensive, and they work really, really well for this. I'll just show you this real quick here. You do have to feather the trigger a little bit to control the CFM. So what I did was I cut a piece of 1/4 inch and made a spacer inside here, and let's see, right inside here, so that the trigger only moves so far, gives you the right amount of flow to make the thing function right. But the problem also was, this lever, the trigger lever, will move so far forward that the spacer will fall out. And that is the reason for the little hose clamp here. So that doesn't allow this to move so far forward that I lose my spacer. So we'll get that out of the way. So here's a little bit of the 3/16 I was talking about. The barrel itself, this is actually fairly hefty. It's there's a good bit of weight here. It feels nice when you're shooting it, picking it up and holding it, carrying it, whatever. This is actually a 1/4 inch inside, sleeved with a 5/16, which is also sleeved with a 3/8. So what you're seeing out here ultimately is 3/8 tube. So it's like 3 layers thick here. So it gives it a nice amount of weight. This is some JB weld and to hold everything together. It wasn't really necessary. I thought it would be good, and it is good, but this thing was sticky for like 3 or 4 days, so I prefer a faster dry time. Most of what you see here is tacked together with super glue and also epoxy with the instant set epoxy. So this stuff sets up in like 90 seconds, which is nice because you want to hold these parts in place, and you don't want anything to move on you while things are gelling, and the instant set works really, really nice. And, then let it dry overnight, and you don't have to worry about anything moving while you're not looking at it. And you can get a good night's sleep. So the bottom tube here is actually the magazine feed tube. So all the BBs are in here. And the top, of course, is the barrel. Now you see, and this looks a little funky, and this is where the tape comes in. Nothing special, of course. But let's spin this around, and you can see on the other side, on the top of the diaphragm, there's a nipple that's epoxied in, and then there's actually a hose going all the way to the muzzle. What this basically amounts to is, because the barrel this one is 20 inches long, and your bore to length of barrel ratio is important. Once your barrel gets to a certain length, and near as I can tell, it's around 12 inches, the barrel itself will be so long that it'll generate its back pressure on its own with no BB in it, which will cause it to not function. So my solution to that problem was to actually install a vacuum generator. This is actually an oversized little piece of tubing on here. It's bigger than the bore, so the BBs don't touch this. And there's a hole drilled in it so that when there's no BB in the barrel, the air rushing past this hole, high velocity air creates low pressure. So it actually pulls a vacuum in, and this is just a little 90 that I put together. And I found out that aquarium tubing will fit the 3/16 brake line tube really nicely. So I put some aquarium tubing on to the vacuum generator, and that runs all the way back to the diaphragm. So that when there's no BB in the barrel, the BB's clear, the vacuum generator kicks in and pulls a vacuum. The diaphragm, you can see the diaphragm in here. I'm not sure I really want to poke at this. I'd hate to damage it, but you can see the diaphragm in there. It's moving up and down. It doesn't move up and down a lot. It just moves as much as it needs to. So it moves up. There's an operating pin attached to the diaphragm. The operating pin punches the BB into the breech. As soon as there's a BB in the bore, it chokes off the vacuum generator. So with no vacuum, there's nothing pulling the diaphragm up anymore. And there is a tube. I left this plastic clear intentionally. The tube that connects the magazine to the top of the diaphragm housing is designed intentionally to leak. In other words, this is a quarter inch tubing. There's a 3/16 tubing bushing in here to keep the pin straight because quarter inch is too sloppy. So you don't want the pin wobbling around. So there's a little sliver of 3/16 in here, and in the 3/16 tubing, I took a little needle file and filed some notches in it to intentionally create a leak path. So that when there's a BB in the breech, as soon as there's a BB punched in right here, the back pressure will blow down. So this is choked off, back pressure blows down through this tube and on top of the diaphragm and retracts the operating pin and pulls completely out of the way so that the next BB in line can roll to the feed position. So that's how that whole thing works. It's pretty simple. Like I say, you really got to watch your alignment and how you line things up, and measurements need to be good and things like that. But if you assemble it correctly, it works very simply and pretty reliably. Also, there's I'll probably do a whole segment just on the tube feed, but right here I'll give you a little closer view of this. You can see there's a couple of lugs super glued right here to the magazine sleeve, and then there's also an end cap on the magazine that has a couple of hooks ground in it to grab the lugs. And anybody that's ever messed with any 22 rimfire with a tube feed magazine, this will look really familiar to you. There's nothing new here. It's just this is just an adaptation of the same principle for this. So it's real simple, and we'll do another one on the magazine coming up real soon. I don't want these to be too long. I don't want to get off track or anything like that. So basically you just push that in, give it a little turn. Of course, handmade stuff isn't too standard, so this lug and hook system only works one way. So that's the reason for the gold paint there. So I know, actually I meant to paint that lug gold too, so it would be a match mark, because that's the only way it fits the other way, but it doesn't fit as good as it does this way. So we're going to call that good for now. Oh, I do want to say, if you build the submachine gun version, which I highly encourage you to do, that should really be your first one. For the simple fact that the vacuum generator And all this tubing and this nipple is not necessary for the submachine gun version. A barrel that short will not generate any back pressure on its own. So they work just fine without any of this. The only reason this is here, again, is because the length is so long that it'll generate its own native back pressure without anything in it. So also, you'll see here, just real quick before we knock off for this one, there's a return spring on here. That return spring is really only there for one reason, and that's so that you can fire burst fire. The way this thing works, you can do a magazine dump no problem without a return spring, but the return spring is there because if you, at the end of your burst, the diaphragm always finishes on the second half of the cycle. In other words, the diaphragm is up and the pin is in the way and you're not ready to load the next BB. So the return spring is there so that you can, if you want to rip off 3, 4, 6 at a time, you can do that. And the return spring will pull the diaphragm out of the way. I guess you could consider it an auto cocker. It's kind of like an auto cocker in effect, so that you don't have to fool with it. And that's about it. There's other little features here I'll show you later on down the road. You might notice these little holes here in the sleeves and whatnot. That's all. We'll do another little segment on fabrication techniques in the future. I think the next one will probably be on the magazine. We'll get that out of the way, and then we'll start fabrication techniques, and then I'll show you the tooling that I used, which could easily fit on the top of this table with room to spare. So this is really, really simple. You know, give it a shot. Be careful. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time. See ya. Come on.